I've always been the kind of person who believed that everything had to make sense. My life, my choices, my relationships, they all needed to follow a certain narrative that I could control. For years, I lived with a story in my head, one that told me I had to be perfect, that I had to meet every expectation, and that failure was simply not an option. It wasn't something I consciously told myself every day, but it was a deeply ingrained belief that governed my life. The story I told myself was simple. I was only worthy if I succeeded, if I could prove my value through my accomplishments. It wasn't about who I was, it was about what I could do. I thought if I could do enough, be enough, then I would feel complete. The success I sought was supposed to validate me, to prove that I was capable, that I was worthy of love, respect, and happiness. But for all the striving, I never really felt validated. I felt like I was constantly chasing something just out of reach. I carried this story with me for as long as I could remember, believing that it was the key to everything. If I just worked harder, tried harder, achieved more, then I would finally feel enough. But what I didn't realize was that this story wasn't true. It wasn't a reflection of who I was, but of what I believed I should be. It was a story I had constructed based on expectations, not my own, but those I had internalized from the world around me, from my family, my peers, society. There came a point in my life when this story started to crumble. It wasn't a single moment, but a gradual realization that the harder I worked to meet these expectations, the more disconnected I became from who I truly was. The more I tried to live up to this version of perfection, the more I felt exhausted, overwhelmed, and unfulfilled. It wasn't the external markers of success that I was missing. It was the internal sense of peace, contentment, and self-acceptance that had always eluded me. It took me a long time to admit to myself that the story I was telling myself wasn't true. I had spent so much time trying to prove that I was enough through what I did, through how much I achieved, through how others perceived me, that I had forgotten who I was beneath all of that. I was so focused on being perfect that I couldn't see the beauty in my imperfection. The truth was that I was enough, not because of anything I had done, but simply because I existed. I had value in just being me. Breaking free from that story was incredibly difficult. I had spent years believing that my worth was tied to my achievements. It was a story I told myself, and it had become so ingrained in my identity that I didn't know who I was without it. Letting go of that narrative meant shedding the idea that my value was based on external validation. It meant acknowledging that I didn't have to be perfect, that it was okay to fail, and that I didn't need to meet anyone's expectations, not even my own, to feel worthy. The process of unraveling that story wasn't quick or easy. It took time and a lot of self-reflection. I had to learn to unlearn the beliefs that had been instilled in me for so long. I had to stop measuring my worth by how much I could achieve and start embracing who I was without the need for constant validation. Slowly, I began to realize that my value didn't come from what I did, but from who I was. I was worthy of love, respect, and happiness simply by being myself. As I let go of that story, I found that I didn't need to be perfect to feel complete. In fact, it was my imperfections that made me human, that made me relatable, empathetic, and real. I began to see that the journey of life isn't about perfection. It's about embracing the ups and downs, learning from the challenges, and growing through the experiences that shape us. For the first time in a long time, I stopped chasing external validation. I stopped striving for perfection, and instead, I started to live for myself. I realized that I didn't need to prove anything to anyone. I was enough, just as I was. The story I had told myself for so long, the one that told me I had to be perfect, that I had to succeed in order to be worthy, wasn't true. It was a story that had been shaped by outside influences, not by my own truth. And once I let go of that story, I found the freedom to be myself without the weight of perfectionism holding me back. I still struggle with those old narratives from time to time. It's hard to break free from something you've believed for so long. But each day I remind myself that my worth isn't tied to what I do, but to who I am. I don't need to be perfect to be worthy. I don't need to meet anyone's expectations to feel good about myself. I am enough, and that is the truth I hold close to my heart. As I continue to live, I've found peace in embracing my imperfections, my mistakes, and my flaws. They don't make me less. They make me human. They make me real. And that is more than enough.